Hi, I'm Max Rabidue,
I'm Ben Amelkin.
and we're here at Bridger Brewing talking about energy and resource use in the brewing and alcohol industries.
So energy and resource use in the alcohol industry is astronomical. Many people don't realize the impact that alcohol has on the environment, from intense water use to the constant temperature regulation needed to store and transport alcohol. There's a severe underlying cost to the alcoholic drinks that over 64% of Americans enjoy on a regular basis. Americans have one of the highest consumption rates in the world, second only to China. Specifically, beer is one of the worst contributors to this number. And American drinkers alone use up to over 500 billion gallons of water per year in their drinking habits. Energy and resource use need to be curbed in the brewing industry, but this has to be done through technological means, as a cultural shift to curb consumption is near impossible.
And next we're going to talk to Eli, one of the brewers at Bridger Brewing, for his thoughts on this.
Hello, I'm here with Eli. So Eli, first question, who are you and how did you get into the brewing business? And after that, can you give us an intro to the brewing process and tell us where energy and resources are used the most?
Yeah, I'm a brewer with Bridger Brewing. I got into this through my degree in chemical engineering and a fair amount of luck, just being in the right place at the right time, at least to jump on board with the brewery. As far as energy and sustainability in the process, a lot of our, areas of concern, at least energy-wise, come from the heating and cooling of our beers. Whether it's through taking your wort to boil through the use of like a steam jacket, or in some cases like straight direct flame to a vessel, or cooling it down with glycol once it's fermenting. It's typically the largest areas of energy consumption that we encounter, just due to the nature of the equipment. Heating and cooling massive volumes of liquid like that take quite a lot of energy, and as a result, that's where most of our energy.
Then, does your organization have a sustainability program?
Yes and no. It's not really penned out in its full, in what you could say a full program, but we are very conscious about energy and sustainability here. Anything from recycling materials such as pizza boxes in the restaurant to how much water we use in a brew are all things we try to keep an eye on and reduce waste where we can. We've also started a renewable energy program out of our new facility with a solar panel setup that should, in theory, take our net energy usage down to zero. Ideally, whether that is the case remains to be seen in practice.
And then, what are the biggest sustainability challenges that the brewing industry faces?
For sure, water usage. It typically takes about, on an industry average for craft brewers, it's about 7 to 10 barrels of water for 1 barrel of beer to be produced.
And just for clarification, can you tell everyone how much a barrel is?
A barrel is 31 gallons. With Bridger Brewing, we typically use about 6 to 7 barrels of water for every barrel of beer produced. So we're kind of skirting that industry average, maybe a little under it, but we're still water usage is a very high resource for us. There's ways you can get around that, but even what breweries use is a drop in the bucket compared to what maltsters use for the malt we use and the hops grown, all necessary ingredients for beer. So there's many places up and downstream that use vast quantities of water.
Okay, so is the high cost of brewing unavoidable?
That's a hard question. In a sense, yes. just with the nature of how brewing is done and where brewing technology is at, and with industry standards, like malt has to be a specific grade to be used in beer as per the FDA. Hops have to be put in beer as per the FDA. So to a degree, everything we do has to be done this way. But there's ways you can get around that. Like energy-wise, I mean, insulation is your friend. Anything you can do, like once you cool down a tank, anything you can do to insulate it and keep that cool, to keep heat from leaching in, or vice versa, leaching out, that's just the number one way, energy-wise. At high cost on sustainability of water, that just comes down to best practices, just being conscious of what you're doing, figuring out ways in your brewing process that you can reduce the amount of water you use, whether it's through the brewing process or the amount of water you use to clean with. But at the end of the day, you do need to use a certain amount of all these resources in order to properly brew a beer, and a good beer at that.
Okay. So how do you measure progress in sustainability in the brewing industry?
Yeah, so kind of going back to water, it's kind of the crux of brewing. You can't get beer without water. We measure our progress just straight up on how much water we use. If we notice a significant drop in water usage from batch to batch of beer, like that's a move in the right direction. Anything we can do to really lower that cost and resources is pretty much the best way to do it. I mean, and energy-wise too, you can look at your power bill once a month, measure like your kilowatts that you're getting charged each month, and again, finding ways to reduce that through like insulation or different techniques with like convection and everything to kind of measure which scale you're moving, whether it's high or low. It's pretty much the only way, at least for this industry.
And then the last question is, what is the scale of this issue, and can you tell us the long-term effects of this issue?
Well, obviously it's a very big concern given, how climate change is progressing. Obviously, water is going to become a more and more scarce resource as the decades come.
And especially when we're in Montana, this is especially a salient
we just
issue.
had, I believe it was a record drought this summer here in the valley, at least. So I imagine, especially with the water usage, again, it all comes back to water. That can become more and more prevalent, more and more detrimental to the industry as time goes on, as water becomes more scarce. If there's a record amount of breweries in Bozeman and Montana in general in the past few years, more and more breweries opening up, that's more and more water, more and more strain on municipalities and counties, pretty much across the entire state. So as it stands right now, if brewery growth continues to go the way it has been going, it's going to become an issue sooner rather than later.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eli, for your interview. And if you want to try some of his wonderful beer, it's at Bridger Brewing.
Okay. There are many steps that we would recommend that breweries take. Hops are one of the most water-intensive ingredients in beer, and many scientists have been working on replacing hops with a hoppy yeast. This means adding terpenes, which is a bitter compound that gives hops their flavor.
Yeah, so when you add these terpenes to the yeast, you're able to add more yeast in, which isn't a very water-intensive ingredient in beer, and take out the most water-intensive ingredient to beer, which is hops. And since there's only 4 main ingredients in beer, water, yeast, malt, and hops, this is going to have a really drastic impact. A lot of breweries are also starting to reuse their wastewater as either gray water or farming water, which is especially relevant here in Montana because we have so much rural areas that are, and it seems like we're in a drought every other year. So this could be really helpful for places that need that water. I think one of the more obvious solutions would also be for breweries to invest in green energy. Green energy is not a cure-all to everything, but really diversifying your energy sources and maybe doing wind energy, solar energy, things like that in your brewery can have a really big impact, especially on like the transportation, because most alcohol and especially beer needs to be climate controlled when you do transport it. So attaching solar panels to like the top of these trucks that allow it to cool the inside of the truck so the beer doesn't overly ferment in there without using a ton of extra resources would be very, very impactful. So our solution is really all of these steps and more ought to be implemented by the brewing industry to have the greenest impact possible.
Okay, our message to the class of 2070 would be to look for companies that are working towards energy sustainability, and just to do your research when it comes to buying beer and other alcohol, and make sure that the companies you choose have good business practices just when it comes to energy sustainability and water use.
Another couple really practical piece of advice that we have is bigger breweries often have more infrastructure that they can make the brewing process significantly more green. So try and stick with those really big breweries. I know we all really want to shop small, but sometimes it's better to shop at those really good big breweries because they have the infrastructure to make that beer have so much less of an impact. And the other one is avoid alcohols that can only be brewed in one place. Scotch, bourbon, champagne, they all have to be specifically brewed in one place. So that means that the transportation, which is one of the highest costs in the alcohol industry in terms of energy use, is just maximized. Instead of buying Scotch when you're in America, try to buy bourbon because that's going to be a lot closer and the energy use is going to be a lot smaller. Thank you, everyone.